I'm Clint Loveman. I work on a series of teams actually at Esri, and one of the things I support are some of the OpenStreetMap work that we do inside of Esri. Just kind of show of hands, who here is not familiar with OpenStreetMap? Okay, so everybody is familiar with OpenStreetMap. Okay. Okay. So I might change this up a little bit because the first couple slides talk a little bit about OpenStreetMap in terms of just general what is OpenStreetMap. So I'll try to go through those a little bit quickly and then just talk through some of the more detailed stuff. Anyone here uses the ArcGIS editor for OpenStreetMap? No? Okay. Okay, so there's some content in there for you guys then as well. So I'll do a little bit of background. I won't spend a lot of time on this. So again, you guys are all pretty familiar with OpenStreetMap, so you understand what it is, why it's used, all that kind of stuff. So I won't spend any time there. Again, I'll skip over this stuff. I'm assuming everyone knows this. If you guys have any questions, feel free to stop me if you see something here on this slide and you're not sure what any of this stuff is, because I know different people are engaged in the use and consumption and contributing to OpenStreetMap. So if there's something there, it's like, what is that? I don't know what that is. Just stop me and let me know. This can be really casual. So we pulled some numbers. These might be a little bit old now, but we were just kind of pulling out some numbers in terms of the number of people using it, the number of members, chapters for HOT as well, and then just in terms of really the explosion of OpenStreetMap in the last few years, which again, you guys again are probably familiar with that. So and all this information, if you guys have ever been to the OpenStreetMap wiki, all this information in terms of metrics is there, and we just pulled out some information just to share with everyone. So getting into a little bit of the back-end technology, I think at least before I was introduced to OpenStreetMap, maybe about 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago maybe, I always thought of OpenStreetMap as a cached map, right? I think that's how a lot of people, at least even Esri users, see it, because it's one of the base maps that we provide as well. It's actually pretty sophisticated what's happening on the back end in terms of really what is OpenStreetMap. And really, you know, the cached map is really just one small part of it. There's a huge Postgres database that sits on the back end, and there are a number of editors like ID and JOSM, and Esri has one which is called the ArcGIS editor for OpenStreetMap, which is again one of the things that I contribute to. And then there are a number of editing APIs that actually hit that Postgres database. So that's a vector database, and that's real, and it's live, and it's updated. And again, how many people are actually contributors to OpenStreetMap here? Okay, so about half, and I guess the rest of you guys are probably consumers. So yeah, I mean, it's really quite impressive, because if you make a change, if you use any of the editors, ID is a pretty easy, nice one. If you make a change to that and it hits the post, I mean, it shows up literally in, depending on where you are, you know, minutes or even less than that in terms of everyone else being able to see your change. So it's pretty impressive, and then, you know, how quickly they can actually cache the maps. So in the back end, again, there's a back end database, and again, there's a series of APIs that can actually hit that database, because there's an overpass API and a what we call a Zappy API, which is so the overpass API is really an API that's tuned for querying and reading the database, but not for pushing back into OpenStreetMap. The Zappy database you can read or write, and those are kind of the primary differences. And we've done some work with both of those as well. Just a note on a couple of the editors. ID is a pretty popular one. It's a pretty lightweight web-based editor. JOSM is a Java-based editor, works cross-platform. It's takes some getting used to. Not any JOSM users here? Okay, so I'm not going to offend anyone. Okay, someone, JOSM, it takes a little bit of, yeah, it looks like it was built in the late 80s maybe. So it's a little rough around the edge. It's super powerful once you get into it, but it's got a pretty steep learning curve. And then we've got the ArcGIS editor for OpenStreetMap, which plugs into ArcGIS, or plugs into ArcMap. And we actually just updated the editor for 10.5 maybe a couple weeks ago. So there's a 10.5 release as well that you can actually download from ArcGIS Online, and you can get that there as well. So it allows you to bring in content into ArcMap, and you can actually contribute back from ArcMap into OpenStreetMap. And again, I mentioned a couple of the APIs that you have access to as well. Again, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here, but this is, again, just kind of a schematic just to give you a little bit of the appreciation of what's happening behind the scenes. And again, this is from the wiki, OpenStreetMap's wiki, in terms of what's happening on the back end of how they manage the data and how they push out changes to the base map and to the Postgres database. So specifically what I wanted to talk a little bit about is what Esri is doing with OpenStreetMap, and there's a couple things. Again, probably the most common use case or how people think of Esri and OpenStreetMap is, hey, Esri has a base map. It's the OpenStreetMap, cache tile that you can bring into Pro or you can bring into ArcMap. And yes, that is definitely one of the things we do, and that's probably the most visible thing that we do with OpenStreetMap. One of the things that people probably don't know is specifically on our topographic map, so the Esri topo base map that Esri maintains and publishes as a cache base map, we actually consume OpenStreetMap data to build parts of that. So specifically in some parts of the developing world, Africa for example, where there's not a lot of commercial content available, we actually use OpenStreetMap. We use the OpenStreetMap editor for ArcGIS to bring in content in to build that base map and to supplement the building of that base map that we push out for our users as well. So that's one of the things we do. Internally, we actually use OpenStreetMap for a lot of different things. So I'm actually in our professional services group within Esri. So I split my time between product development, but I also do work on projects with customers and clients. And we've done a number of projects with humanitarian organizations, a World Health Organization, UNICEF, a few other projects like that, where we actually use OpenStreetMap, and we've used it for projects internally, for development projects. We've done one, for example, with NGA for defense projects, where they actually do a project. They wanted to compare OpenStreetMap data to their own data. So NGA, which is the mapping agency within the United States, they have their own worldwide database, and they wanted to know, how complete is their internal data compared to, for example, OpenStreetMap. So we actually did a project with them where we actually did a comparison of their content, global content, to OpenStreetMap's global content. So again, just another example of some projects that we have going on internally within Esri that uses OpenStreetMap. So just a couple new things that we've started doing, and this is just kind of a behind the scenes things I just wanted to share with you guys. ID, people, the contributors to OpenStreetMap, are you guys using ID? Okay, cool. So one of the things, we gave a similar talk like this last year at our user conference in San Diego, and one of the questions that we kind of got, or a lot of the feedback that we got was, what editor are you using? How do you want to contribute? Those types of things. And one of the things that came up was a lot of people are using ID because it's a really easy web-based editor, and what they wanted to do was to consume some of their Esri services inside of ID. So for example, if I have an image service or a web map service or something, I want to actually show that as a backdrop in ID. So we're actually working on a R&D project to extend ID. So ID is an open source. It's actually up on GitHub if you've ever gone in there. You can actually see the code for ID, which is the web editor that OpenStreetMap hosts and uses and promotes pretty heavily. So we've started actually integrating to hopefully do a pull request at some point, which will extend ID, which will be able to consume Esri web services directly inside of ID. So you can actually point to your web services and actually see them in ID and make modifications to OpenStreetMap based on that. We don't have a timeline if and when. Again, it's part of the open source thing, so we'll have to make the changes. We'll pull in a pull request and wait for the open source gods to kind of work their magic and stuff, but it is an active project that we're working on. One of the other kind of research and development projects that we're currently working on is looking at moving over some of those tools that we have in the ArcGIS editor for OpenStreetMap, moving those over into Pro as well. So we've just started this work maybe 6 or 7 months ago, And so there's a lot of work to be done there, but we've started that. And again, no timeline for that. But again, we're starting to look at moving some of those tools and technologies from ArcMap over into Pro as well. So that's some of the other stuff that we've got going on with OpenStreetMap inside of Esri. So has anyone seen the ArcGIS editor for OpenStreetMap tools in ArcMap before? No? Okay, one person. Okay. You don't count, Richard. So let me quickly show you the tools. Like I said, and this is an ArcMap, and like I said, we're in the process of migrating these over to Pro. But let me show you kind of how it works. So it's a download. And again, you can download that from ArcGIS Online. There's an install. It's a series of geoprocessing tools. So let me quickly open up. Once you have the tools installed, they show up here as a toolbox, OpenStreetMap, and you can actually see there's quite a few of them. What I want to run is a really simple one. It's actually a model. It's download, extract, and symbolize. So let me open up that. And I'm gonna kick the tool off. It'll run for a little bit. This is not a huge area, and we don't have a lot of time. So I'll kick the tool off, and I'll jump back to my slides as I get the tool set up here. So the first thing it does is it's going to use the visible. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use the visible extent to pull from OpenStreetMap, so I'm going to use that. So one thing to note is OpenStreetMap is based on WGS 84. This actually is the OpenStreetMap database that I've pulled in here, and like most cache-based maps, it's auxiliary web Mercator. So this is reprojected to WGS 84 because that's what OpenStreetMap is used in. So that's just kind of a note if you're going to be using the tools. So I've got the extent defined, my visible extent that you see here in ArcMap, and then it wants a feature data set. So I'm going to create a new feature data set in my default geodatabase here. I'm just going to call it OpenStreetMap. And what I'm going to do is, once this loads here, I'm going to essentially pull in content from OpenStreetMap and bring that in, and it'll store features inside of that geodatabase as point lines and polys inside of that geodatabase. So let me kick it off here. And this, I think this area here, when I tested earlier today, takes a couple minutes to run. So I'll let this kind of process here, and hopefully I can go back here to my PowerPoint. So as that's running, again, just a couple more details on the actual tool set. So again, you can download it. Again, if you can go to the ArcGIS Online item. Again, it's a pretty horrendous URL. Don't worry about that. The easier place to go is to the product page. So if you just go to Esri.com, software, ArcGIS extensions, OpenStreetMap, you'll get to that same URL. And it'll give you a little bit of information. If you scroll down, you'll click on that, and it'll ask you to download. What it will actually download is an installer, and you can install it for 32-bit or 64-bit as well, depending on your operating system. So there's an installer for that. And once you install it, again, it runs in ArcMap. After the install is done, you'll have a toolbox added to your GP, to your toolbox, which has all the OpenStreetMap tools. So really what the tool allows you to do is, again, the most common use case is worldwide access to vector source, right? That's probably one of the most common use cases for OpenStreetMap, not only in ArcGIS, but most people are using OpenStreetMap as a worldwide vector data source. Because it's crowdsourced, depending on where you are geographically, some areas are better than others. So just kind of as a note, if you're not super familiar with it, typically Europe is really good, Africa is really good as well, relatively speaking. Asia is pretty good. North America is not as good because there's a lot of commercial content. But again, you'd have to look at local areas to figure out what makes the most sense to when to use OpenStreetMap versus find other sources. The other cool thing is, once you download the data, it's vector data. It has attributes. It has all the tags that people contribute to OpenStreetMap. So it's not just vector data. You can actually run analysis on it. You can do buffers. You can get attributes. You can get all that information. So you have analytic capabilities. One of the other really useful workflows is network capabilities. So you can do routing off of this, and our tools support that. You can actually download OpenStreetMap, and if the data is there, you can actually build a network and route based on OpenStreetMap, and that's a really common workflow with these tools as well. The other part is, again, you can contribute back. So in the demonstration that I was doing, I just browsed to an area and I downloaded the OpenStreetMap. There's another tool where you can actually make modifications to the data. So let's say once I download that data, I can make modifications to the attributes or the geometry, and I can then push those changes that are in my local geodatabase back up into OpenStreetMap, and these tools support that as well. You just have to be a member of the OpenStreetMap community. You have to have a login. It's because when you type in your login, that's what gets registered as who made these modifications to the OpenStreetMap database, but these tools support that as well. So like OpenStreetMap, the ArcGIS editor for OpenStreetMap is free and open source. Primarily the code is actually written in C#. It's actually up in GitHub. So we actually have, there's a couple of developers in Esri that contribute to it, but there are some people out in the community that also contribute to it as well. So you can go there and you can actually see the source code, you can make modifications to it, you can branch it, you can fork it, you can do whatever you want with it. Again, it's primarily based on C#. So again, specifically, what are the tools? There are actually 14 compiled tools. It's a pretty big tool set. When I say compiled, meaning those are the C# tools themselves. There's one script tool, and there's actually 10 models. So the one that I ran, which is the download, symbolize, and extract, is actually a model that we put together which uses some of the compiled tools together in a common workflow. There's a couple of models like that as well. So because it's geoprocessing and it's geoprocessing tools, a lot of people can also make modifications and put together scripts and workflows to build their own tools. And there are a couple of people who have done that. These are just a couple examples. People that I know I've worked with or communicated with, where someone actually, this is a private repo, but what they did is they built a specific renderer using our tools, and it's all written in Python, and that's a GitHub thing as well. There's a couple of defense organizations that actually, this one here, this is a repo that you can look at. I met this lady, I don't even know if she's here. She was here last year. She works for the British Defense Agency, and what they did is using these tools, put together another workflow that automates the workflow where they download the OpenStreetMap, and then they actually symbolize it, and then they do a cache of their own data, and then spit it back. So they can actually consume it in the field as well, so that was kind of neat. So it was just kind of cool to see how other users are actually contributing and using the tools that we've done and actually sharing those through GitHub and other code sharing mechanisms. So while you've got a few minutes, you can download the app if you haven't done it, fill out a survey on this demo theater, and this is how you do it. And as we're doing that, I'll kick back over to ArcMap, and hopefully it's done, and we can look at the data. And there we go. So yeah, it took 2 minutes and 7 seconds to download. So again, this is the result here. So you can see it's created a series of layers, and again, all the different symbology. And again, it's just data now that sits inside of a geodatabase. So yeah, your points, lines, and polys. And you can do whatever you need to do with it inside of ArcMap. And like you said, what you could do is you can actually make modifications, and if you so choose to, you can push those back up with a upload OSM data tool. So that tool here allows you to, if you make modifications and you want to contribute back to the community, you can do that with this tool set as well. So with that, I've got maybe like 8 minutes left, so if there are any questions, let me know. Thanks. Any questions? Let me give you a mic. I think this is what I'm supposed to do here. Yeah.
So since ArcMap is so powerful, there must be content you can create in ArcMap that can't be pushed to OSM, right?
Yes. Annotation. Great example, right? So yeah, just because you have something in the geodatabase doesn't mean it gets pushed back. So primarily what the workflow is, consume OpenStreetMap, and anything that's in this feature data set that I created, you're making modifications or extending that feature data set and those features and pushing it back. It's not like, hey, here's a random geodatabase with any schema. I want to push that up with the OpenStreetMap. No, it's kind of a pull down, make modifications, and push back up. Yeah. Does that answer the question?
Yes.
All right, cool. Any other questions? Oh, okay, in the back. I'm not going to run, I've got time. So I'm just going to walk slowly.
Did you plan to do anything distributed mapping or crowd mapping?
Meaning, for example?
Like HOT? I mean, what HOT is doing, like they divide the areas into small boxes and then assign those boxes to specific people?
Oh, right, for hot.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. So the question is, are we doing anything with distributed editing? So sorry, I have to walk away from the speaker. So the question is, are we doing anything with distributed editing and whatnot? So on the slides, there is a, let me just pull it back up real quick. I think it was here. Yeah. So on this slide here, there's this HOT, which is the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team. So there's a sub-team, if you would, or an extension of the OpenStreetMap community that deals specifically with humanitarian organizations. And what they do is, it's kind of a workflow where, for example, a disaster happens somewhere in the world and they need spatial information. Maybe there's no spatial data there. So what they do is they actually divide up the world in smaller chunks and say, hey, OpenStreetMap people, can you contribute to building data over this area? So it's kind of like a little workflow. And so there's a specific web application that is geared specifically towards HOT. And specifically how we're planning to support that is going back to that whole ID concept, where most people who are contributing to that type of humanitarian workflow are using ID. And so what we want to do is allow people who are contributing to that to use the existing HOT website, use the existing ID editor, but if those contributors are using ArcGIS services, that we can use those to supplement and update OpenStreetMap as well. So we are not, so I guess the short answer is, we're not specifically doing anything, but what we want to do is empower those people and those technologies with the content that we have in Esri to better support that. So, any other questions or comments? All right, that's all I have. So if there's no other questions, thanks for showing up. Appreciate it.